Hi, I just got back from watching A Strange Loop in San Francisco at the Toni Rembe Theater, put on by the American Conservatory Theater, which is a wonderful theater company. This is the second show that I've seen by them this year, and I've been very impressed with the shows that they put on. This is my first time watching A Strange Loop in its entirety. I've seen some clips, you know, from that they use for advertising, the NPR Tiny Desk concert and stuff like that. And I've listened to both cast albums probably 2 or 3 times each, including once this week to prepare myself to see the show. But this is the first time that I got to experience the show in its entirety, the way that it's meant to be seen, which was really exciting for me. I've been very curious about this show since about 2020, when it won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. Mostly because it won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, because that is a rare award for a musical to win. It's only happened 10 times so far, once a decade, which is kind of weird, but that, that's how that works. And A Strange Loop went on to go win Best Book on Broadway. It also won Best Musical, but I've been really curious about the book. The book, the music, and the lyrics are all written by Michael R. Jackson, which is an incredible feat in itself. It's extremely difficult to write all three of those, and very few playwrights, composers, I don't even know what to call, I guess just composer lyricist librettists. Anyway, very few people accomplish that task. And I think he did a stellar job with it. There's definitely issues with the book, and really, I'm sure all three aspects. I'm not a big music person, so I couldn't tell you what the issues with music are. But overall, I think he did a really phenomenal job with the writing of this musical. Like I said, A Strange Loop, it's not a perfect musical, but it's a really important one, I think. It it makes you really sit there and think about how the stories that these characters are living reflect on society, what implications there are for the way that this story unfolds. And there's a time and a place for theater that you just sit and enjoy. I'm a big fan of Anything Goes. I love 42nd Street. There's a lot of great musicals that don't do much beyond entertain you. Um, but I do really appreciate a good musical that can do more than that. And that can really leave a lot of room for discussion after the show. And I think there's a lot to discuss with A Strange Loop. It's an interesting show. It doesn't completely resonate with me for several reasons, because I don't think I'm the target audience for that, which is fine. I'm not black. I'm certainly not a black gay man like Usher is in the musical. And there's a lot about this show that talks about his experience. And so there's things about it that I definitely did not quite understand, or that didn't resonate with me personally. But again, that's fine, because a beautiful thing about theater, and a significant thing about theater, is that it helps us put ourselves in other people's shoes, and it gives us it gives us the means of learning that perspective. And I think that Michael R. Jackson did a really great job of showing us what it can be like to be a black gay man, in this era, and talk about the issues and the difficulties that one might deal with, especially when they don't necessarily fit the norm of whatever it is that they're dealing with. But there's a lot in A Strange Loop that really does resonate with me, and I think it will for a lot of people, because you don't have to be black and you don't have to be queer, I think, to understand the core of this show, right? Because it's so much about identity and understanding the concept of the self. There's actually a really fascinating essay in the program in here. Hopefully, in any other program that you get for A Strange Loop, it'll have that. Michael R. Jackson wrote it. It said that it appeared in the original program from Playwrights Horizons back in 2019. But he was talking about how it's not a formally autobiographical show. It feels like one. But it's not formally autobiographical, but it's really based on a lot of the experiences that he had as a 20-something year old. And experiences that he's lived being named Michael Jackson and stuff like that. He talks about how difficult it can be to live in somebody's shadow, and how challenging it is to learn who you are and to learn how to live with who you are, because that can be equally challenging. And so I think that at some point, anyone who's trying to figure out who they are, they're in those early 20s years where they're trying to figure out, how to separate themselves from their parents' identities and how they form their own person, separate from their friends and their friends' expectations of them, separate from their parents' expectations of them. I think anybody in those situations will really find this a powerful story. It is not an easy story. Dealing with the self never is, right? But it's more than that, because it's dealing with the others too. Dealing with those expectations that other people have of you can be really, really challenging. We see the character Usher go through his life as a people pleaser. And how is he supposed to be himself? How is he supposed to be himself when he's a people pleaser? Especially when he's gay and his family doesn't approve of that. There's some really poignant scenes, both talking about how he interacts with his family, or showing his interactions with his family, but also showing his attempts to date, and how difficult that can be. I think A Strange Loop does a good job of depicting the stress and the fear that come from either not knowing who you are, or knowing who you are and not wanting that to be who you are, or knowing who you are and having people actively wishing you weren't that way, actively trying to change you or pressure you into not being that way. And there is a lot of stress and fear that come from those situations, and that really resonated with me. A Strange Loop is a very audacious musical. That's a good thing. We need a lot of audacity in the theater, and in our media in general. We need shows that aren't afraid to put the spotlight on concerning norms in our society and ask, why is this okay? Why are we allowing this to occur? And A Strange Loop does that, I think, very well. It feels messy as a musical. I think at some point that's the point, because it's a writer writing a show about a writer, writing about a show about a writer, writing about a show about a writer, and that just is supposed to go on ad infinitum. And so it doesn't end cleanly. But I guess, again, that's the point. That's, I guess, okay. The lyrics are really interesting in A Strange Loop. I'm a big lyrics nerd. I pay a lot of attention to the lyrics in musicals. and I find the ones in Strange Loop are very interesting. Um, the rhyming, the rhyme schemes can be cool at times. Like the song that always stands out to me the most is Intermission Song, probably because I've heard that song the most. Um, I love the vocabulary in A Strange Loop. It does a really interesting, it does a really good job of balancing modern slang, but also very specific, more advanced terminology that you don't usually hear in musicals, like extricate and subjugation. These are very specific words, and I think he did a good job at expressing what it is he wanted the audience to understand, and mixing that with realistic dialogue among the thoughts and the character of Usher. That actually is a really interesting thing too. The thoughts. The thoughts are really interesting because that is such a theater thing, right? This isn't something that you do so much in movies, I don't think. Is having your actual thoughts be represented by actual humans. And that was fun. Confusing. I had no idea who was who at most points in time, other than Usher and maybe. Well, I got when they were supposed to be playing Usher's mother or something like that, but the fact that a lot of this is in his head, um, and how significant that is because this at the end of the day does seem to be a show about how you deal with the self doubt of being who you are. Um, and that was a really interesting way of depicting it. It's definitely not a comfortable show to sit through. But there's a lot of scenes that are designed to make you feel discomfort, whether it's in terms of Usher's dating life and how he's allowing himself to be treated, or in terms of how his family talks to him about him and how he allows himself to be treated. A lot of it does come down to basically how he allows himself to be treated and how he's trying to learn how to improve that. And we can just hope that Usher will be able to, and we can just hope that Usher will be able to learn how to stand up for himself, stand firm on who he really is, and allow himself to be who he really is. There was a line that, there were several lines that really stood out to me, but the one that I remember right now was if something like, I'm paraphrasing, I think at this point, if the truth isn't scary, is it really worth living? And that was just interesting because a lot of times our reality, of ourselves can be very difficult to deal with and to pursue the truth in terms of our identities. That can be very scary, especially in the world we live in where, you know, where being something other than a cisgender heterosexual white person can be extremely difficult. And A Strange Loop still talks about, basically, it still demonstrates how important it is to find that truth and to live that truth because, it's. Usher's just miserable when he's not doing that. Those are my thoughts on A Strange Loop. Great show. I highly recommend it. And Hopefully, you will get the chance to see it. If not in San Francisco, in LA, or maybe once it gets licensed to be performed elsewhere at your own local theater. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see more of these reviews. I plan to review every musical that I go to from now on.